You guys ready to go? Yep. They're not operational?
Those aren't?
Okay.
Are we,
We-
do we have anything up here? Okay, there's just nothing on them yet.
Okay, we can get started? All right. Welcome, everybody, to our Tuesday, December 17th, 2024 Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District meeting. Our first item is to call this meeting to order and to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand for the pledge.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, our second item of business is to see if there's anybody who wishes to do a public comment on an item that's really not on our agenda. If there is somebody that wants to come to say something to the board, go to the podium, state your name and address and your item. And I'm only looking at one person here, and I don't think he wants to say anything. So. Okay. Let's see here. Our public hearing will be our next item, but we're not supposed to start that until 6:04. So, I would like to, can we go out of order and do the approval of the agenda? I think we can. Let's do the approval of the agenda. And there is one item we need to add, which would be 4.4, which is Spring Lake Demonstration Parcel Survey. That would be under the old and new business. And with that change, I would be looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Approved by Manager Tofanelli and second by Manager Burnett. Any discussion on this motion? Now, I think your guys are ready to vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, well, let's see here. I think we're going to go ahead with the public hearing. Okay, so right now, we're going to have a public hearing, which will be on our 2025 budget and levy. And with that, I need a motion to open up the public hearing.
So moved.
Motion by Manager Burnett.
Second.
Second by Manager Tofanelli. All in favor of the motion, say aye. 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 Opposed? Motion carried. The public hearing is now open, and I believe we are going to have a presentation by our Administrator, Casey.
President Loney and managers. In accordance with state statute, at the September board meeting, the board approved a budget and levy for 2025. At that meeting, the levy that was approved reflected a 6% levy increase over 2024. At this point, the district can choose to lower the levy but not increase it beyond the 6% that was approved in September. At the November board workshop, 3 levy options were brought forward and considered, and at the November meeting, the board directed staff to come back with 2 options for the levy, one representing a 5% levy increase and the second a 6% levy increase. And those various budgets and levies are included in the board meeting packet. Overall, the budget that is being proposed for approval is $3,354,025. And that budget amount is the same regardless of whether levy option A or levy option B is selected. The main difference between these 2 options is really how that budget is being funded, with levy option A having a little bit more, 61.6% of the budget being funded by a levy versus option B, where 61% is funded by the levy. And really, the difference between levy options A and B is really a difference between approximately $20,000 of allocation between the levy and the budget reserves. The budget that is being brought forward for consideration tonight includes funds to implement the district's ferric chloride site improvements, the Swamp Lake Iron Enhanced Sand Filter Project, the 200th Street pond improvements, and the district's portion of the grant match for the Prior Lake Outlet Channel pipelining project. The levy option B would result in having the same tax rate as the 2024 levy. In the budget as well, we continue to build up a reserve for future alum treatments. 90% of the budget is being directed towards projects and programs. 30% of the budget is being funded with budget reserves. Certain projects have taken a little bit longer to come to fruition, so we had built up a budget reserve, and so we are now expending that budget reserve for the projects that are now being included within the budget. And in addition, $140,000 of the budget is being funded by our partners, including Spring Lake Township, Scott County, and the Board of Water and Soil, Bowser, the Board of Water and Soil Resources. And this is a significant increase in grant revenues over 2024. So with that, staff recommends that the Board of Managers approve Resolution 23-385 for the 2025 budget in the amount of $3,354,025. Staff also recommends that the board adopt Resolution 23-386, that is at the dollar amount reflective of option B, the 5% increase, certifying the final 2025 administrative and metropolitan water management tax levy.
Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing. Is there any questions from the board for our administrator on her presentation? Any questions? Okay. This is a public hearing, so if anybody from the public wishes to speak on this issue, please come to the podium and have your say. Okay, we're not seeing anybody coming to the podium for a public hearing. I guess I would ask for a motion to close the public hearing. Motion made by Manager Burnett.
Second.
Second by Manager Topanelli. All in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye. 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 Oppose? You're okay, Frank.
I was okay.
Yeah, motion carried 4-0. Okay, the public hearing is closed. So now we're to look at the resolutions that are being proposed. The first one is to adopt the 2025 budget. It's Resolution 24-385, and for a total amount of $3,354,025. Anybody want to make that motion?
So moved.
Motion by Manager Tofanelli. Second by Manager Burnett. Any discussions on the motion? Any discussion from anybody? I just want to make one comment. Although the dollar looks big, the reality is there's a lot of budget reserve that we have been building up for the last few years to spend in 2025. So although the budget looks big, a lot of it is levy plus a big budget reserve. So, okay. I assume everybody's ready to vote then? All in favor of the motion of approving Resolution 24-385, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Resolution 24-385 is approved. Second motion, as recommended by staff, would be Resolution 24-386, Option B, which is a 5% increase in the levy, which is keeping the same tax rate as we have in 2023, or 2024, excuse me. So, anybody want to make that motion?
So
Or
moved.
Motion by Manager Tofinelli. Second by Manager Burnett. Okay, is there any discussion on this resolution, which basically talks about the levy we're adopting, which is in the amount of $2,046,450. Any more discussion? Any thoughts? Okay. Assume you're ready to vote then. All in favor of Resolution 24-386, Option B, approve by saying A. A? The motion was to approve I or A. I'm from Canada.
Canada, eh?
Oh, okay, let me do that again. All in favor of approving Resolution 24-386, Option B, say by A or I. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried, 4-0. Okay, very good. Oof, glad we got through that. All right, we did approve the agenda with the addition of 4.4 Spring Lake demonstration parcel. So now we're into our old business, which is programs and project update. And Mr. Anderson, are you taking this?
Yes, I am.
All right.
All right. I have a whole lot to share today, so bear with me. I'll start us off. We're still at the Prior Lake Fire Station number 2. The building's closed to the public, though we still like to see your faces. Please call or email with any questions. As talked about at the board workshop, we want to give a big shout out to Emily Dick. She won the 2024 Outstanding Watershed Organization Employee of the Year. I think that name speaks for itself. We're very gracious and lucky to have Emily here. For the lake level ending of the year, 2024, Prior Lake is at 901.17. And let's see here, Spring Lake is at 910.23. The lake level loggers have been pulled for the year, and we will install them as soon as possible in the spring. So one comment on this, the graphing, I think we figured it out, and overall we've heard good feedback this year on our lake level graphing website, and yeah, we're pretty thankful that we got that dialed in. We've been reaching out to ice observers this past month, and we have gotten reports that Upper Prior Lake iced in, which is how we define that, is when the lake is 90% covered. On December 2nd, along with Fish Lake and Spring Lake, Lower Prior Lake officially iced in on the 11th. So on Upper Prior Lake, we've had data from residents shared with us since 1966. Overall, the trend seems to be climbing, though, each year is a little different. Sometime between November 23rd and December 7th is pretty average. So this year we we iced in sooner than the typical. So always interesting. Thanks to all the observers for submitting their data. I'll be talking about the 2024 lake water quality results. These results were a culmination of annual samplings that included 12 bi-weekly events. I'll go through the Tier 1 lakes, which will be Lower Prior Lake, Upper Prior Lake, Spring Lake, and Fish Lake. Our sampling team at Three Rivers Parks District samples total phosphorus, chlorophyll A, SECI, total nitrogen, and chlorides. To compare our results to state standards, I'll be mostly focusing on total phosphorus, chlorophyll A, and SECI disc. And for additional comparison, the state standards are based on data collected between June through September. For these results, I analyzed trends. We made report cards. The report cards provide grades based on state standards, frequency, and amplitude of the lab results, the seasonality, and then the statistical significance of the trends within the last 10 years. So these report cards are all available on the district's website, along with the annual data and then historical trends. So next steps will be discussing how this data impacts project priorities, and we'll go into that next month with a deeper dive into lake phosphorus data. All right, so Lower Prior Lake has remained steady, and on all these report graphs and results, we'll want to focus on the right side of the graph in 2024. The blue lines indicate SECI, and that's how far you can see into the lake. The dotted line indicates the standards. In red and orange, that's the phosphorus, and in green, that's chlorophyll A. The red and green, let's see here, the red and green analyses, you'll want to be beneath the dotted lines to meet state standards, and for the blue SECI disc, you'll want to be below that. So overall, Lower Prior Lake is looking good. Again, the lake grades here are A's across the board, with phosphorus improving, and a non-statistical trend in chlorophyll A and clarity. This is our lake that we like to hold as our standard. Overall, this is the lake that we, water quality that we want within all our lakes. And on the back side of the report card, we have, on all the lake report cards, we have a project highlight, and on this one, we're highlighting the pipelining project. So for Upper Prior Lake, overall, there's a near-term trend of rising total phosphorus. We've been meeting the SECI disc depth, and then the chlorophyll A is also above the standard this year. Upper Prior Lake has received A's across the board. Over the long-term trend, the lake is improving significantly across all three standards. The program highlight for Upper Prior Lake is our carp management program. We've been working really hard to meet the ecological threshold to go beneath 89 pounds per acre or 100 kilograms per hectare. So I'll give a little preview here and share that we have exceeded this goal. We're very happy to see that. So we're hoping that carp management work here has made a big difference in water quality. And for Spring Lake, this year we saw nutrient results climb. Both TP and chlorophyll A are exceeding state standards. We did meet the standard for SECI disc depth. So for Spring Lake, our grades are B, C, and B. Over the long term, results are improving, though you can see this year there was quite the climb in each one of these categories. The highlight on Spring Lake is our ferric chloride system. And for Fish Lake, we saw water quality results decline. We are not meeting state standards for any of our 3 standards for phosphorus, chlorophyll A, and Secchi disc. This lake has historically sort of hung out around the standard. We are working on implementing the lake management plan. We'll be following up and trying to meet these goals here. Fish Lake received C grades across the board, and over the long term, the lake shows improvements in this 10-year average, though long term it's been greater than 10 years, the trend's not strong. So our highlight here is our management plan. So what are the takeaways from our annual lake water quality data results? Well, heavy rains this spring flushed a lot of nutrients through and into our lakes. Results show declining trends across the board. June was among the wettest months on record, which typically doesn't bode well for good water quality. Lots of nutrients entered and came through the system here. This shows that Fish, Spring, and Upper Pryor Lakes remain susceptible to external loading. So next steps, we're going to continue looking into how external versus internal loading impact our lakes. I'll be diving deeper into water quality data next month, looking at how bottom phosphorus is telling a story about how some of these alum treatments that have occurred on Spring and Upper Pryor Lakes are how they're reacting to the system. And then I'll expand in the next section here about how we're monitoring external loads through stream and stormwater monitoring. And this is really tied into additional projects and how those are geared towards improving those loads. So Zach Nagel, our district technician, helped provide me slides. And this is an update on how staff are utilizing the WSKI database. It's been instrumental in how we're storing and using current and historic district data. And right now we're building tools within this database to analyze complex data sets. For example, I'll guide us through how we're creating outputs, and we'll focus on a station location here where this red arrow is located. This is a site along County Ditch 13. Our site name is County Ditch 1. I'm going to talk about how nitrate data is being analyzed. So within WSKI, we can house, store, and view our continuous water level data. This is data collected through sensors that staff installs in the stream. These sensors collect measurements every 15 minutes, and we can build long-term level data sets. So this red line is just water level against a stage or an elevation on the left. And this shows 3 years of data. So we have many, many years of data for many of our sites. Within Whiskey Database, we use a rating curve manager called SCED. We build relationships between water level and discharge. So we take field measurements that show how much water is moving through a particular location at a particular water level height. So we build these curves that then use our stage data right here, and then we can compare that with how much flow is going through that site. In addition, Whiskey is used to store our lab data. This is time series data. It's convenient to review data to show, for example, nitrate. We can use many different computations to display averages to building complex equations that I'll explain in the next slide. So if we put all those together, we can calculate a load or a mass of nutrients through a station over time. So this can tell us on a given year or over a defined interval how much nutrient has passed through a specific location. And this is used to, it's used to pass to our engineers and project managers to design projects and BMPs. It shows where potential hotspots, where problems occur. And using Whiskey, we can build this tool and then easily, so the building is the hard part, which is what we're working on, but then for future uses, this tool is a click away from analyzing the data for next year. So what does this look like? We can compare year to year, how much nutrients are going through. Say we put in a BMP, we can define the improvements that BMP provided, and then evaluate what the effectiveness of that BMP made, and then compare that and share that within our goals. So Whiskey Database is already proven to be quite helpful in quickly analyzing and sharing our data. So I guess what does this mean? Well, monitoring allows us to identify problem areas, monitor changes, predict benefits. Something that was discussed at the annual watershed conference was that Comfort Lake, Forest Lake received the highest amount of clean water funds in the state over the last, no, I'm not sure what the time frame was this, but they contributed this to their monitoring and their high quality data sets. So we've already, we have really strong data sets. We're going to continue building and transforming them to better align with our projects and help reach new funding sources with our data. So most grants require data that aids in getting those funds. So we're excited to use this Whiskey tool to benefit future needs.
Do we, you want to take any questions on that report?
Yeah, yeah, any questions on the water quality or data?
I'd like you to go back to the report cards. I think I saw on Fish Lake, Fish Lake, the phosphorus level is 40. Go to that chart. It's 40, whatever it is, UG over L concentration. That's the standard for Fish Lake. Now go to, I thought I saw, goes to the other lakes. There's 60 for Spring. Is that right?
Yes.
Why is that?
So Fish Lake is considered a deep lake. So the state standards, let me just go, for Secchi, it's 1.4 meters. For
Okay.
phosphorus, it's 40 micrograms per liter, and then for chlorophyll A, it's 14 micrograms per liter. Now, Spring Lake is also a deep lake, but it's got a site-specific standard that
Okay.
was created or through coring. The state, or we, oh gosh, how do I say this? Carl, I might have to defer to you on the wording here.
I think you got it, but basically the district put forth an argument to the state based on coring evidence pre-settlement that the load to the lake was higher than the state standard and advocated it to be 60 for Spring Lake. And MPCA accepted that argument based on the coring analysis, and it was changed.
It was somewhat contentious at the time. No, there was a population that fought that a little bit. It was contentious. There's some history on that,
Okay.
but that's just history.
So in addition to the phosphorus standard being raised, the chlorophyll A was also raised from 14 to 20.
Yeah, I always thought Fish Lake would be the 60, but it's Spring Lake. Okay. All right. Any other questions for Jeff on his report from the board? All right. That was my, go to our projects then.
Okay, thanks for warming up the mic, Jeff. I'll be really brief today, just touching on some work we are doing on Fish Lake Management Plan implementation and the pipelining so that it can be heard at this meeting space. So the update for Fish Lake Management Plan is that we are focused on reducing nutrient loads that are coming off of the landscape. In this last year, that was our approach, and one of the projects identified was a field that had come back in our soil sampling as very high in phosphorus, which is the primary nutrient that contributes to algal blooms and can be a problem for lake health. So we worked with the farmer managing that field. Farmers have a self-interest in knowing the nutrients of their fields. They don't want to pay for inputs that they don't need to put that are naturally in the soil. Also, this farmer we've worked closely with in lake-friendly farm program and manages the field to manage nutrients, retain soil through cover cropping. So very good relationship here. There was some projects proposed, built projects to treat filter water coming off those fields. Our partnership with Scott Soil and Water Conservation District proposed, well, those built projects are great, but maybe a first step that would be cheaper and easy to implement today would be to work with that farmer to keep it in rotation of crops that are going to draw down those nutrients. And you can help that farmer do grid sampling, which basically tests how that's going. So this is the first grid sample that we arranged with the farmer. The cost is roughly $650 a year, depending on acreage. So really low cost, and the farmer does intend to continue managing it in that conservation mindset. So we're hoping to continue doing this with them, and we'll play it by ear. The built projects are still an option for the district, but I think it's a good first step to understand how much we can manage just simply through managing how the land is used currently. Also, it helps to encourage the soil retention practices there too, so keeping soil on the field is also in the farmer's best interest. So this was a success this year. You can see on the plot on the left, those little squares are the sample units, and the blue means that it's very high phosphorus. So our soil sampling from our lake plan was accurate. It is high here. I will say very high is a little bit subjective. The maximum found on this field, 85, is what I would call very high. But in the mid-20s, that is a level that Minnesota Department of Ag has said anything around that level or lower is not going to run off into water. So there's some subjectivity here to high and very high. But that was a success, and I'm trying to think. I thought I had another thought here, but I'll leave it there, unless there's any questions on that. The other project I wanted to cover was the Prior Lake outlet pipelining. As been mentioned in meetings past, we're looking at lining our pipe, which is aged, maintain the structure, and also increase the flow. We had begun that work in 2023. Since we have received a grant award, got that agreement signed, we've been able to renegotiate with the engineer on how to adjust their contract, which was originally for 2 years ago. So that is moving forward, and we'll be seeking authorization to bid for the pipelining at the special PLAC cooperators meeting on January 7th of next year. Presuming that authorization is approved, that bid window that would follow that would allow for construction this winter or next. It's likely next winter, but we want ideally to get the bid advertised as soon as possible, so that if people do happen to have a window and a short workload this winter, we can get this done. So that I believe is all I have, if anyone has questions.
Any questions from the board? I know we discussed a lot of this at our workshop, so. All right. Thanks, Emily. Okay. Is that it for programs and projects? Okay. Next item is we're going to talk about the ferric chloride system assessment. And
I'll open it up and then I'll hand it over to Brett Emmons from EOR, who's here.
okay,
But I just wanted to give you some overall context from here, and then Brett will dive into the technical expertise from the podium. But because this work task has also been spread over multiple years, I thought it would be good to just review where we've been, when things came through. And so the first thing I want to kind of organize our brains around is in 2023, we did the initial, we'll just say wave one of this work, which was really to look at the nuts and bolts. Is our tank going to hold, and how long? Make sure that our equipment is safe and operational. So that happened in 2023. 2023 was a drought year, so we weren't able to do jar tests, which were critical for the optimizing part of the system. So that work was done and completed this year. So you'll see that the report kind of was phased. You've seen some of this before. The first thing that we looked at to make sure that our system was safe and operational is look at our existing equipment, the building, and EOR recommended replacements. So this whole study was really spurred by the fact that staff was concerned with the age of the tank, but we don't know how long tanks last with ferric chloride, and we needed an expert to give us that opinion. Additionally, we did know that the tank was not going to fit through the door when a replacement was needed. So looking at our options there. So that assessment was done, and the outcome was the interim report was presented, and alternative A was selected for construction. That little vote sticker indicates that the board has voted on that already. That was a past democratic exercising. It also looked at providing options for the access drive. We have had issues with chemical delivery and wanted to look at different ways to get off of Highway 13 there. Another vote by the board managers. Drive 4 was selected for construction. Both of those are already moving forward. We submitted RFQs and have retained contractors for that work to be conducted in 2025. So those things moved forward even though the system optimization wasn't complete, which is great that we were able to keep that momentum. And then the last piece for the safe and operational was that staff has been operating on a operation and maintenance manual that we put together ourselves with our best knowledge, but we weren't trained in water treatment systems, so we got some expert opinions to update that. So that work you've seen before and voted on. So today the really new material that Brett will focus on is the optimization. And this work was really looking at areas that we could improve our effectiveness. And those things are like, should we be looking at treating differently in different seasons? How does lake level impact alternative chemicals that we should be considering? And then is mixing something that we should build into our system? These were all questions that we had kind of floated around when we were thinking about our system. And so you'll see in Brett's report here that the outcomes of that in this latest full report is a new seasonal dosing curve that they found lake level is creating a bypass kind of short circuit where more water is avoiding treatment than we would like. In the parentheses here, I've put that we have been working with EOR. We knew that this was an issue, and so the board has also already voted to move forward on task 1 of a outlet study that would identify some potential solutions for solving that. This study, this assessment looked at, yep, it is a problem, and that next study would tell us, okay, this is how you solve it. So another example of moving forward. And then lastly, an outcome is that although alternate chemicals and mixing studies, they were conducted, and there were some that could provide slight increased efficiencies or unknown. It's not the lowest hanging fruit it doesn't seem to be the first item to attack to get efficiency in our system. So I just kind of wanted to give a general orientation. You'll see a lot more detail. And then I also wanted to remind or just set the expectation that because of these phases, it's not a living document. So the original system equipment assessment, we've replaced things as they've been malfunctioned. So that it was written in that time. However, the operation and maintenance manual is where we intend to keep that current and annually updated. So I'll end really quickly on what we're voting on today because of these two. You have seen there's several votes there that have already occurred. So today is focused on if you would like to vote on, the vote would be accepting the system assessment report. And what that means is that you're not committing to any action, but you're accepting EOR's professional opinion. from the report. And if you don't accept, it would remain as draft form. The report would still exist, but it wouldn't be cited in future plans or reports. So this is really a paperwork keeping step of the work that's been done here. With that, I'll hand it over to Brett, and we'll just do a slight PowerPoint transition here. And it looks like Brett's not seeing his screens. Would you like to come over here, Brett, so you can see what you're presenting?
Otherwise, I'll look up there, but yeah, now it's gone off. Maybe I will go over there.
Yeah.
Our screens are, oh, there we go.
Oh, it's back.
Check it now.
This one hasn't been on since I walked over, so I don't know.
Why don't you come? It's nice to see.
Turn this mic off.
There's always something.
Hello, board managers. My name is Brett Emmons with EOR. Work with Carl, and I've been involved in this project for many years, actually. This is kind of exciting because this has been a long-standing debate amongst the board and your predecessors on how to attack this, and it's a pretty important facility for the watershed, but also knowing that it's aging and what could be done. It was designed and originally put online 25 plus years ago, and it's had a few modifications over the years, but really hasn't had a full review. So glad to be here and bring you up to speed. I also was kind of looking at the packet, and I saw, boy, it's over 100 pages, it's intimidating, and then I realized it was our report that caused that, so then I felt a little sheepish. But so obviously we included a lot of appendices, a lot of the lab tests and different things like that, but I think I'll just try to go over briefly the summary of the highlights, and I mean, Emily did an excellent job there, really kind of giving you the main things. I mean, this is sort of the culmination of some pieces that have already been done and already have been in front of the board as it stands. Do I advance with the arrow? Or? Okay. So some of this you have already seen and looked at, but now we're kind of filling in those last pieces because we really did have an unusual situation where we were gearing up to do sampling, and then 2023, we just kept waiting for the water to flow, and it just never came. And so we did decide at that point, rather than to kind of eliminate that from the work and kind of leave that question mark hanging out there, we still wanted to come back and extend it into 2024 to be able to get some samples. So these are kind of those missing pieces. Just an overview of the system. I think you're pretty familiar with it, but just want to make sure we kind of get everybody oriented. We're coming into the south side of Spring Lake. You've been to I think most all of you have been to the site out there. The dosing station is back at the County Road 13, and the desal pond is further down. And then because of some MPCA requirements, there is now a weir that is intended along the ditch that is intended to kind of push the water into the pond, the desal pond, but it is made, and that was the PCA's request, was that if you get into a higher flow situation, the water would then spill over and continue down the ditch and not be treated in the system. And we're finding that, I guess I did want to note on this photo on the left, this is really a kind of a large wetland bay of the lake. So it is very much influenced by lake level, and as the lake goes up and goes through those higher periods, that's when we're starting to see water back up into the system, and so it's not really behaving in that kind of ideal situation that we would like. So just touching on the things you've already been through, so I'm not spending much time on this. You evaluate the current system, came up with recommendations. I mean, really the bulk, or I would say the majority of the emphasis was getting at the idea of what is the status of the tank and all the operating equipment in there, and the building, and what type are your options of trying to redo all of that. And that was really the main emphasis, and we were able to move forward with that. So that's great. Took a look at all the old equipment and different sensors and made those modifications. And so you really kind of move forward with that, and I'm glad Emily mentioned that. I think that has been definitely a kind of professionalize the operations plan for the facility, and just make sure we have some safety features included in there too. Since these treatment systems are very typical in, say, a water treatment plant, if you're delivering potable water to a city or in a wastewater plant, but they usually have a lot of operators and a lot of people and a lot of experience with this. And this is really a unique setting where we're coming out to a surface water and applying this chemical. And that's also one reason why the MPCA has been they don't see many of these, I'm not sure there are any others I know of, and so they do kind of take a look at this and just try to be very cautious that we're working in a natural environment as we're doing all these things. So it is unique. And as discussed, there were originally we thought we'd just kind of look at two different kind of driveway options after trying to work with, be very cooperative and work with the local landowners and just thinking through it. That kind of ended up expanding into 4 different options, but we were able to come back to this kind of minimal approach, which I think saved the district some money and just a more practical approach of how to make sure we can get in well with the chemical access. So, we had the interim report where you saw a lot of this content already back in September. Previous year, you authorized the design to move forward, and then you now have already moved forward with the construction of the replacing of the tank. I think you were kind of fortunate. We had sort of expected that the building would likely be up for needing to be removed, but as we got into it and looked at it further, we felt like it does have a bit of life to it. So then we started looking, can we just remove one side to be able to take the tank out? So I think, it took us a little longer to work through that, but it was really, I think, an overall benefit or savings to the district that you were able to kind of repurpose that building because it really was in very workable condition. Whereas the tank and things were really getting at the end of their typical lifespan, so you're starting to kind of live on borrowed time. So the pieces that we still needed to fill in as we got that additional data of the following year when we had some flows in the system. One of the things that we are looking at that Emily suggested that it will need some further investigation and some more modeling and really a more detailed look at, but we had suspected, and we just wanted to go in and take a look at the data, was when Spring Lake gets high, you're basically backing up the entire system. So it tends to come and just sort of flood the pond. It floods the weir, and at some point the water, when it's coming into this high situation, it's just as easy for the water to just go straight down the channel over the weir as it is to get pushed into the treatment area. So in that case, you do have possibly some water going in and being treated, but then other water that just wants to take that kind of straight path and go on down to the lake without being treated. So it's a challenging system, but it is what it is. And so I think there is definitely important to look at that and see whether there's anything else that can be done with the weir or the configuration, just to make sure that when we are dosing the water, we're getting as much of the water to go through the system as possible. And here's just kind of an example, a photo we were out in 2023 of where, in this case, the water wasn't even all the way to the top of the weir, but still the water, it just takes a longer, harder flow path to get through the pond, so the water was starting to just flow over the top of the weir down the system. And here's an example of, so in the report, there's some graphs that take a look back at historic data. We picked this recent one, 2024, as an example of, this is the blue dots are the plot of the lake level, which then backs up into this area. The green line is would be the outlet of the desilt pond to go back into the ditch. So you can see there's major times of the year where that is already being ponded. And in the past, there were some small outlets trying to push the water out to get additional filtering in the wetland. So all of that is kind of backwatered. And then as you get up to that red line where the high flow bypass weirs, there were significant parts of the year when there was more flow occurring that the lake was high and we were getting that potential for water just to go straight down the ditch and not get into our treatment system. So that's one thing we suspected was the problem just from anecdotal observations being out there, and we're able to basically quantify that a little better with this kind of data analysis, looking back at historic data, since we do have some really good records to work with. So now shifting into the next piece of this was to say, well, you did some jar testing and came up with some dosing curve some 25 years ago or so. It would make sense to just take another look at that. We now have a lot more years of data of monitoring on the system. We'd like to look at the monitoring data and do some of this jar testing, or bench testing is the term used for that, to just see in kind of an ideal situation, do we think the chemical being added is effective? And so that, we know ferric chloride is fairly effective and it's used by a lot of entities, and that's why MPCA, permits it in this natural condition. But we wanted to see if at different doses, if that mattered, as well as then what other chemicals we might want to look at. So here's a graph. The orange is showing rainfalls throughout the year of 2024. The blue is the ditch flowing then at the weir as it crosses under Highway 13. And then the green lines are the times when we took samples in the spring and summer, so that we could have a couple different data points of the system to take a look at it. And so then the jar testing is it's probably been around for 50 plus years. It's basically what we call a bench test. You're basically taking your sample water, bringing it in on a bench, putting it in jars, and then you'll add your coagulant, in this case ferric chloride or one of the other chemicals. There's a little paddle system in there, so you can set up a whole series of jars where you put in different doses in each jar. The paddle will twirl. It usually goes through a fast twirling, which is basically trying to create the coagulation, and then it goes through a slow stirring, which then it is trying to simulate what would be the flocculation, because actually as the chemistry happens, you start to create little small flock, and then for it to settle better, you actually want those small flocks to be kind of coming together and attaching themselves, and then they will settle out faster and better. So again, if you're in a fine-tuned water treatment plant, all this stuff is pretty important. So they play with all those variables and kind of say, what's the best case? In our case, we wanted to see how those mixing and flocculation components work, but we also just want to see if we're trying different dosing. So we kind of bracketed the existing dosing, went lower, went higher, and saw what that looked like, as well as trying out some other doses. It turns out those were kind of proprietary ones provided by these two major chemical providers that are out there in the marketplace. And we also were able to test for several other parameters that are in the water. There's already a background concentration of iron. There's TSS. There's other things that it turns out, and part of what you'll see here is, we think that there's also probably some other chemistry happening in the water that could be interfering with it. There's some things that actually compete for that iron. So instead of the phosphorus being able to get it, some other material may be binding with the iron, and so then our iron's going out for some other reasons. So we have some of that background information, which is good. So here is a time series of the phosphate, which is the kind of the form of phosphorus that's dissolved that hangs around the water that we're trying to target. That is going through, and then the data from the district is the blue dots, and then we had the two labs that had said they would do this free of charge, and the Hawkins one seemed to correlate. They're using different lab techniques, so there is, not uncommon to have some different results. So the Hawkins one did have a better match with what the overall data was, but I think relatively speaking, they're all of interest, but I think the Hawkins was probably the most representative of the actual phosphorus concentrations we were seeing. And I don't need to go through all the tables that are in the report, but this just goes through all the different dosing amounts that they used, what kind of removals we got, and what that would look like. So it's kind of, and part of that, I think that probably shows up better in this graph. I think there's two main takeaways from this graph that illustrate well, which is we definitely think there's a seasonality. So as you'll notice, you go into June, July, August, September, all the bars are quite a bit higher on average. So we're definitely seeing a higher amount of phosphorus coming through than those spring months or those fall months. So that's important to note. And then I guess the other thing I would note is you're also seeing the error bars are quite large, because there is definitely, you can see it in the historic data, you can see it in the data we saw, there is just a fair amount of variability, probably because of those interfering factors that are affecting what's going on in the water chemistry. So it's not that we would like to see a little bit tighter bracket around those to say, yeah, when we're dosing at X, we're always getting pretty much this consistent removal. We're getting kind of a variability in removal. But we have to work with what we have, and we have to work with kind of on average. This is this is the implication that you are getting in the kind of the early months and the late months of the season. Your existing dosing curve is probably looking good, but you are having higher concentrations come through. So kind of the main conclusion we came out of this was to talk about the dosing of the ferric chloride and to go with a higher dose during those summer months to adjust your curve. You can stay with the existing curve in the earlier months, go with this in the middle months, and then go back to your original curve. And this is something, there are some limits to how much iron you are allowed to discharge underneath your permit, so you will need to be continuing to monitor this, because we think there's ability to put more iron in here and get more capture, but we will need to be monitoring that at the outlet just to make sure that that is playing out in real life. We've tested it in the lab, but now we need to see what it's going to play out here. And we did look at several of the various chemicals there, and you'll see that discussed in the report. They do have kind of separate handling issues. Some of the alum would need to be heated because it doesn't do well in those colder temperatures that your systems operate in the beginning and ending of the season. There's pH fluctuations. Some of the other chemicals that are kind of newer out there are not as well known by the MPCA, so we do think there would likely be a lot more hurdles to be able to get those in. So what we found is you can get some, like the polyaluminum was one that seemed to have a higher removal, but it also costs quite a bit more. And so when you took those together, it was coming out fairly similar as the ferric chloride. So I guess that was our recommendation. You could certainly go in a different direction if you want, but our recommendation is, this is a tested chemical that's fairly accepted. The MPCA has already permitted it. We think that's a much better pathway than to trying to introduce a new chemical that may, we're not sure what the MPCA will say about doing this. So we could certainly look into that, but I think from a pragmatic point of view, we feel like, staying with ferric chloride, but changing the dosing in terms of the seasonality would be a good way to optimize your system, and then just keep an eye on it. Jeff does a great job, and all the staff here, so we'll just kind of need to be able to monitor that and see how that actually is playing out. So we gave the recommended update to the dosing curve. So if I missed anything, please pipe up. I just tried to kind of hit some of the highlights and let you know. So this actually brings that full report, those missing pieces, all together into one spot, and it's kind of lengthy, but that's, it's good that you've gotten, after all these years, I think it's, it's great that you're actually seeing all these things actually being implemented and being done, and things are being updated. I'll take questions now.
Any questions? Manager Tofinelli?
Brett, thanks for that presentation. I did have some questions.
Sure.
On the report, ignoring the errors that are in the report that I reviewed last evening, there's a number of errors and references to charts and errors that I think should be corrected before it's submitted to the
Sure,
board.
through and clean things up.
I'm a bit curious on some of the material selection. One of them being, when you look at the storage tank and you go with high-density polyethylene, why there seems to be the desire to go to PVC in your tubing when that's generally considered an inferior material to high-density poly, and why the tubing system isn't in high-density poly or even cross-linked polyethylene, better yet.
I will have to check with our treatment person specialist that deals with all the equipment side.
It seems like
Make a note of it.
something that, I've mentioned this before, that's really, I can't understand the engineering and why we're doing that. So that was one question I had on material selection. The report also, which I guess you're squarely on the fence, in one section of the report, I believe page 52, you recommend alternative B. Later in the report, you recommend alternative A, and I can appreciate you can't be wrong with that, but we prefer we get one or the other.
I will.
And the board has their opinion, the staff, whose opinion is more important than the board's opinion.
Is this regarding the driveways, or which was this?
This is regarding the options on,
I think A and B were for the tank. So B was just one tank, A was
4 tanks,
multiple.
thank you,
Yeah.
thank you, Emily. 4 tanks versus 1 tank, and, we went through the whole material, and if you deliver X amount of gallons, you save this, and we won't even go into the variables on, it's somewhere between $1 and $4, and some of the realities of the commercial world. But the report, to me, should pick one.
Yeah, no, it was an oversight. If we had 2 of them stated, we were definitely recommending the single tank at the end of the day. I know the sensors were quite expensive, and so we ended up going with the single tank as our recommendation. So apologies if that was.
I was a little personally disappointed that in 27 years since this was put in, the recommendation doesn't really seem, save for the radar measurement, doesn't seem to bring any of the current sensor technology to bear. And so one of my questions is, does this new system allow for remote monitoring for leak detection? My understanding is right now, someone goes, sees a leak and says, oh, we have a leak. And I don't know how often we go down there, but it seems like in today's world, we should have some type of remote monitoring that would, even an alarm that would say where something's moving faster than predicted. Do you have any?
Well, Jeff, I believe that was discussed, but.
Yeah, currently, Manager Tofinelli, the system does not have an active leak detection monitoring system. So
My question is if we're able to use the radar and the liquid level sensor, that the radar, and I won't have the correct name, but I understand outside the tank, monitoring liquids is a problem for anyone that's dealing with tanks. It's always a challenge, they fail. But what I'm wondering is if with that, there's some way to monitor remotely the fact that you're expecting this to drop at some set rate, 1 inch every 4 hours to whatever it is, based on your dosing level. And it would seem to me we should be able to remotely monitor that, even to the point of alarm that says something's not going right. And I'm wondering if that's something we can incorporate, or something, or you say, no, you don't understand, it just doesn't work that way, and I'm fine with that. But sensor technology today, you know, you get your doorbells, you see people come by, you get all of that. So, not the same thing, but I'm looking for some improvement in our system. Monitoring's one easy one, to me.
Good point. I will follow up with our kind of equipment specialist on this to see if that is something that's commonly used. Or if that's available that we could use, because like you say, a lot of things are coming out new. The one thing we did have in the report, I didn't emphasize a lot, is kind of this idea that we think there is likely other things going on in the water chemistry throughout the years, since this is a very natural system and dynamic system. And so we did mention, and I think staff is open to that, that if you did want to further fine-tune your dosing, you could have a real-time monitor for several of those chemicals that we think may be interfering with the binding with the ferric, so that you could actually start tuning your, kind of along the same lines, you could in real time basically be able to turn up or down your dosing based on those other chemicals that are present, to be able to, if it's starting to compete and steal too much of the iron, we could add additional iron. But that is something that there are sensors that are like that. There's a lot more. It's really the sense, you're right, in terms of like the water chemistry, a lot of those used to be, the standard was you had to take them back to the lab and you'd get the results in a day or two. More and more of those are becoming real-time sensors where they can pick up what's going on in the water immediately, and so then that could be tied back into a smart system. So that is something we discussed as another way, if through this first step we still feel like we're not fully optimized, or as we'd like to be, I think that would be then a logical next step, and that is in the report.
Well, that's something I'm very interested in understanding. We've had a system, it works. We're upgrading all the moving parts, the pumps, the tank, blah, blah, blah. But I'm looking to see what our next logical step is from a technology standpoint. And while we've got maybe the nuts and bolts of a working system, I'm looking for guidance on what our next logical steps. The whole sampling thing, you know, we can leave the building alone where we are there. The water chemistry is another challenge. Yeah, I saw in the report, I believe, somewhere we'll do, maybe we want to do more experimentation. I really question DOE kinds of stuff on 5, 6 parameters, all impacting that. I'm not looking for us to become make this a lab experiment. I'm not sure how your beaker work with your spinning paddles, how that equates to the natural environment. I understand you can get readings, but with pH, alkalinity, suspended solids, all these parameters coming in, I'm not sure how your correlation is going to do any more than give me more data that I can't understand, and that I don't think anyone can bring to say this will make your system more effective. Maybe you can do that, but I don't see it. I'd like to think, as you mentioned, that with all the wastewater treatment, there's already studies out there that we should be able to dovetail off and not create our own thing. And I appreciate your comment that this is somewhat of a rare surface treatment in a watershed. Are we the only watershed? Maybe we are. Wondering if there isn't other things to leverage on studies. I like reports that cite other studies.
Right, yep.
And that support that. Otherwise, we get a lot of opinions, and some of this, some of these things, there's a lot of fat words, leads us to believe, suggests, not really words I really want to see in an engineering report.
Yeah, I think, to me, some of that speaks to these large error bars that unfortunately there is a fair amount of scatter in the data. If it was a nice tight correlation, then we could say, yeah, it's right there. But we also don't want to misrepresent the data to say that there's not a bit of variability there. It's a natural system that changes throughout the seasons with a lot of different parameters at play. So it's not as easy to just say it's a nice clean, the correlation's nice and tight, and so we can say A equals B equals C, and we're done.
I appreciate the complexity of the system, so it wasn't to ask you to tighten your tolerances and make the data look pretty, because it, in this case, won't. But I also don't want data, a ream of data that doesn't really tell us anything and only suggests possible solutions. With the water going up, the water going down, replication of results is probably near impossible.
In terms of, and back to your point about, trying to correlate this, I mean, I guess I would be a little cautious. We did do a lot of literature search as part of this to see what else are people doing in natural systems with that natural variability of temperature and chemistry and flows that go all over the place. And we really weren't finding many of these kind of systems that we could reference to and that we could just borrow from. And I think trying to go to like a wastewater treatment plant system, which is a different kind of water and different strengths and actually tends to be, kind of uniform. By the time it gets to the plant, there's not these huge fluctuations of one day there's a huge storm and another day there's not. So I think it's not totally transferable. I think there's some lessons you can draw from that, but I wouldn't want to take the wastewater and just automatically apply it to this kind of a surface water condition.
I can appreciate an uncontrolled system versus a controlled system, which your wastewater
Good way.
allows you to do. So I'm not looking to minimize the complexity and say this was easy, but I'm also not looking to get data that doesn't really help us along our goal. You did lay out on the high water levels, and you showed 1 year. I had some curiosity. 1 year is, to me, a snapshot. I'd like to look over a longer period to see if the lake levels of Spring Lake warrant. Is that a 1 year thing, once every 10 years? It's a little bit like, 30-year flood levels. And something with a little longer timeline to see if that's something we really should do, because it happens every other year.
Yeah, so if we did tackle that or address that in Figure 10 of the report, there's it's about a 14-year history, but there's also some gaps in there. So the last 11 years we had pretty continuous. There's still a few gaps. We had some visual observations, and it looked like about 11 of those, 9 of those 11 years, it did, not only was backing up into the pond, it actually was backing up to the level of the weir.
I didn't
For
catch
some
that.
period of time,
Okay.
sometimes a couple times a year.
I'll dig back into it to just have a look.
Sure, it's a good comment.
I just wanted to jump in before we shift to respond to your advancement questions, Matt. Things I think I know that might be lost. One update we've made is, or are going to make as planned for the site improvements, is a pressure switch. Right now, we don't have an automatic shutoff, which is a requirement of our permit. That will be coming in the new update. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but I believe you have plans to make the radar sensor communicate remotely with cellular, so that you could do leak detection. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that is in the plans.
Emily, yes, the plan and what's budgeted for in 2025 is to utilize the modem within the new data logger to be able to monitor flows and dosing rates at the facility. We'll to do additional tank level monitoring might require additional programming that we'll have to work with the data logger manufacturer with. I think there's a good possibility that we could program some rate of change alarms within the tank. It's a great comment. So something I will certainly look into, and how we can have, because we can set alarms on these data loggers. That's not a challenge. How we then communicate and display those alarms to meaningful outlets like staff email, or how those alarms get distributed. And I think that'll be some challenges that we'll need to work through, if that's certainly a feasible route right now.
Well, I think it's something that we want to financially support, is the reason for my comments on, sometimes people are looking at how can we do this as cheap as possible, and that's one approach. Another approach is, how can we make this more efficient, more effective? You running down there to say, I think we got a problem. Well, I think there's better ways to do things. So some of these comments are just questioning what the technology will do. I don't know. I don't know that equipment well enough. You mentioned the pressure switch. When I was going over this, I was wondering, I wasn't clear. It almost felt like right now it was sitting on the wall. But then there was all discussions about skid and the pump on a skid, and I was wondering why it wasn't, if that's the way you were going. I wasn't really caring how you went, but it wasn't clear if you kept the pump separate or you purchased it kind of pre-assembled. I almost think of a mule, and all the equipment's right on there. You bring it in, drop the skid, connect one tube, and you're off and running, as opposed to piece by piece. And it didn't matter. It just seemed like you mentioned a skid, and the pressure should be on the skid.
Yes, you're correct. So we just had a call with the chemical distributor, Vesco, who also designs these skids. And I learned a lot about skids. We talked about them when we were choosing this, like, why is it so expensive? Well, it's because they're very custom, and it's basically laying out a whole grid and flow pattern that's going to make it successful. So everything will be mounted to the skid. It'll be custom to our flow. In that call, it was very evident how specialized our system was. These people's full-time jobs are designing these, and multiple times Adib, the technical expert, had to be like, well, I understand why you would suggest that. That is typical, but our system operates here. We need to backflush this way. So it's been a very thoughtful design and implementation of that. So that did go forward. It will be on the skid, and the skid will have it's built for us. Yeah.
I think I'll let someone else go.
Frank, you want to talk?
Yeah, please. Thanks so much. So I see your recommendation is to accept the 2024 system assessment report, right? So there have been notices of some things that may need to be revised, et cetera. Is there any problem if we do not accept this report right now, wait for whatever modifications you were referring to, and then accept it once it's in its final form? Is that okay?
You can make whatever decision is okay for you, but it would not impact implementation, because we can make it. You make those decisions individually. The only impact is if you don't eventually adopt it. We can't cite it. The other option, depending on how big of changes you want to see, is you could make a motion to adopt pending typo and those cleanup of, and mention what, if it's small enough to mention them, you could do that.
Well, that ties into my comment. We've already made a lot of approvals. This report is kind of backwards in my mind. Should have had the report earlier, or at least you should have put the first phase and waited for your second jar testing phase, and then added to the report as an amendment, because it makes no sense when I read the report. Well, we made recommendations already. You replaced equipment already. So if we don't approve this report, you've already done most of it. What's the point? And some of these things, which kind of, I'm a little report too, a little bit on the impact of the backwater. I mean, Carl, you've been the engineer here for I don't know how many years in EOR. You certainly must have known there was backwater in that area. If you didn't, that's a shame on you. Somebody must have known. And then when you read it, it says we need to do another report. If there's one thing I hate about a report, you got to do another report to finalize something. Something should have been in that report to say, here are some possible concepts on fixing this problem. And some of the other thing is with the feed station of the culvert, how we can improve that. There's three critical areas: the tank, getting the feed to the right source and making that system really paddle or get it mixed well, and then the influence of the backwater. There's nothing in this report that really tells me any of those things. So I'm looking at it going, that's kind of like with Matt. I said, I think we're just replacing equipment and looking at maybe doing some other reports. And it's inconclusive when you do the jar testing. It's like, well, we really don't know what the efficiency is or should be. So I look at this and go, why didn't we put in, we made the decision on the driveway? Why didn't we put in, we made the decision on the tank? Why didn't we say that we've already replaced these equipment in the report? Because we've done that. And when you say, if we don't approve this report, well, we just can't implement, you've implemented, I bet you 85 or 90% of it, or will be.
Approving the report is separate and
Yeah.
that from what we implement past or future.
Yeah.
Those are separate decisions.
We've already approved the quotes for the building and everything, so I guess I was just a little disappointed in the way this report was presented and some of the content.
Just wanted to clarify that back in September 2023, you did see the bulk of this, and all the things that you acted on were in the report that was the interim report that was delivered to the board and reviewed at that time. So it wasn't that,
Right.
these were pieces that were added to it, but now it has all of those last ones. But you
I know. It
did
just
see all
seems-
of that
The
before.
report seems funny. It's like a summary, and it should have included our decisions, as far as I'm concerned, because we've already made decisions on alternative A or B.
The report that was presented then didn't contain the typos, ironically, because I reviewed that last evening. So I don't know what gremlins crept in on your thing, but you are correct. We did. It's the clip-on on the sampling, which we did request to look at alternatives, and that get kind of stuck on, and they should almost be separate to it's minor, so I'm not bringing it up, but you are correct. We did see this report just about verbatim. In September, so no argument there. That wasn't a surprise.
And I'll take partial responsibility. We did talk with the OR. They asked, would you prefer to see this separate or together? And there were some areas that just were so interrelated. It was the first version they presented was separate. And from our perspective, it was also awkward. So I think this is a unfortunate byproduct of 2 years and not having it be a living document, which is an effort of not spending time on updating something that's not going to impact implementation.
Frank or Ben, do you have any other comments?
I have one of the reasons I dug into this a little bit, maybe more than I did last time, is I'm a little disappointed in some of the estimates of the job that were presented and didn't pan out. The budget on this was off by 45%. And so I dug into this with a little more detail based on that disappointment from our last meeting. So understand that when I get a chance to look at this again, I maybe spent a little more time on it.
Good point. What's the flavor of the board? Do you want to?
Well, if it won't delay the process.
No, I don't think so.
Or if it's just going to be the rat running around the ring, then I'd like to have them give us a report when they've gone through it completely. They've been able to fine tooth comb, as they say, and then give it back to us, and presumably we'll act, without delaying anything, I hope. Or maybe,
So I think the right procedure would be to table this item.
so moved.
And moved by Manager Boyles.
And then what? I can
Table that
second
we
it.
give direction that we want to have this report revised, come back at a future date.
I would just like a clean report that we're going to approve, not one that has errors and questions that,
And
That
that's,
is what tabling would enable.
that's what tabling will
That's
do.
it.
Okay.
We're tabling the action on this one tonight
I'm
and asking them to correct it.
Is that a second?
second, yes.
That's a second, okay.
Thanks, Ben, thanks for the help.
My pleasure. Okay, is there any more discussion? Tabling you can't discuss, right, Frank?
I don't believe we
We
can.
can't, so we have to vote on tabling. All in favor of tabling this item, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Carried 4-0. So then, the direction that we want to give is, I think the motion would be to bring back a clean, revised report for the board to.
ASAP, yep.
Is that right? So the motion would be to bring back a clean and revised report at a future date for the board to review. Anybody want to make that motion?
So moved.
Motion by Manager Boyles,
Second.
second by Manager Toffenelli. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, we're not hearing any or seeing any. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. All right. That took a little bit of time, but that's okay. It was worth it. Next item is permit 24.02, Trunk Highway 13 trail vote. Is there, staff, do you want to do a report on this?
President Loney, I will be making the presentation. We are just bringing up a few slides to help aid in that presentation. All right, there we go. President Loney and managers, I will here just quickly provide an overview of permit application 2402. It is for the Highway 13 trail. So the project is a 10-foot bituminous multi-use trail that basically extends from County Road 42 down to Oakland Beach Avenue on the west side of Highway 13. It is being proposed for 2025 construction by the city of Prior Lake. The permit addresses a number of the district's rules: land disturbance, Rule C; stormwater management, Rule D; erosion and sediment control, Rule E; floodplain alteration, Rule F; and wetland alteration, Rule G. The project results in a net increase of 1.15 acres of new impervious surface. Of that, 3/4 of an acre are actually exempt from District Rule D for stormwater management. Our rules include an exception that says if the project is a multi-use trail or a trail, bituminous trail, 10 feet or less, that is buffered on one side or downstream, so its drainage is going towards a vegetated buffer strip that's 5 feet wide, that new impervious is exempt from the rules. So a large portion of this trail met that requirement. So the trail is draining to a vegetated buffer that was 5 feet or greater. So what that meant was that then ultimately about a half an acre or 0.48 acres then had to meet our rules for stormwater volume control. And so that resulted in the need of about 1,742 cubic feet of volume control. And it appears that this project will meet that through the use of 5 best management practices. There is also a retaining wall that's proposed along the trail to minimize wetland impacts. The city of Prior Lake is the LGU that regulates wetlands and wetland impacts. So the city kind of gets to regulate themselves as it relates to the wetlands. So staff reviewed the project and brought forward some comments that we would that are included in the report and the application that was in the packet. And the first is just to provide additional documentation. So this is for the city to provide additional documentation to support the stormwater volume storage. So it looks like the 5 BMPs will meet the storage requirements, but we need additional data so that we can actually verify that volume storage has been met. Staff is also proposing some construction plan revisions to better depict one of the BMPs and to add some additional erosion control measures. The applicant needs to submit a signed permit. The permit right now in the packet has not yet been signed, and they also need to submit a signed construction plans. And then finally to submit a performance security by the construction contractor. So we received a completed permit from the city on November 21st. By statute, we have 60 days to take an action on the application. 60-day period goes out to January 20th. The board has basically kind of three options. Option one is to approve the permit. Second is to table it and extend the permit if there is additional information or requests that the board would like to see, or to deny the application. So staff recommends that the board approve the permit application for the Trunk Highway 13 trail, subject to the conditions noted in the permit application and staff review comments.
Okay, thank you. Good report. All right, so it is a project for a trail in the city of Prior Lake, and we are looking at approving the permit application. So a motion would be to recommend option one, board approval of the permit application for the Trunk Highway 13 trail subject to conditions noted in the permit application and staff review comments. Anybody want to make that motion? So moved. Motion by Manager Tofinelli.
Second.
Second by Manager Burnett. Any comments on this proposed project or discussion? I think it's a good project, and it looks like it's been well reviewed. I didn't know that about our rule that we exempt 0.75 acres, but that's good. We're following our rules. If everybody's ready to vote, I assume you're ready to vote. No discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Now we want to move to item 4.4, which was added to our agenda, and it is a Spring Lake demonstration parcel survey. Emily, are you having that?
I'm on it. Some of you may be familiar with one of the district's properties, which is a section of shoreline along Spring Lake, just near Shoreline Boulevard Northwest. It's an undeveloped section. We completed a restoration project as a matter of demonstration. And as we've been looking into the maintenance of our properties, some questions have come up. We have done some buckthorn and invasive management and treatment on this property since the restoration to keep those practices in place. We do not have a precise understanding of our boundaries where they are. They don't, when you buy a property, they don't come marked. And so what we'd like to propose as staff is to approve a surveyor to go out, survey, and mark the boundaries of this parcel so we can adequately maintain that shoreline restoration with invasive treatment and also so that we know where our boundaries are if neighbors are doing activities that we don't want on our property, which is to serve as a demonstration. One example that kind of cued this request is there's been a boat lift. When you take a boat lift out of the boat dock, taken out of the lake in this area, it's steep, they just put it on the shore. We don't know if it's on our shore or if it's on theirs. So this would help us know where to manage our property. So the proposed action would be a motion to approve the contracting of Valley Surveying for surveying, marking, and mapping of the Spring Lake demonstration site for an amount of $3,200 for execution by the district administrator and with any further non-substantive changes on advice of legal counsel.
Okay, very good. Any questions on Emily's report? Anybody want to make the motion as contained in the memo? I don't want to reiterate it. So moved? Who said that?
I did.
Ben? Manager Burnett? Seconded by Manager Tofinelli. Okay, any more discussion on this item? If not, are you ready to vote? I assume you are. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, we're at the treasurer's report, and I am going to do that for Manager Morkenberg, who's not with us right now. So what we have right now, as of November 30th, 2024, which is the date that Christian prepared the monthly report, we have $1.523175 in available cash in our reserves. And we also have 1.8 million in restrictive and committed funds. So our total funding that we have is 3.384 million in total funds. We did receive our second half Scott County levy amount. It's in here, it should be about 888,576, but I think it's more than that, isn't it, Joni?
Yes, President Loney, it actually came in closer to 930,000.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So it came in, this was an estimate, I think, at the time. So it's 930,000. So essentially, if you look at our reserve, we're really up around 2.4 million. So our reserves are good. We have plenty of good funds going into the 2025 budget, which we need quite a bit of our reserves to make our budget for next year. And with that, I think I'll just keep it that simple, that at the end of the year, our reserves are looking pretty good, and we're ready to rock and roll for next year. Any questions? Okay. Oh, Manager Boyles.
Do you have a estimated cost of our projects? You had this long list of 10, 15 projects here. Can you pull a number out of the air for me? Okay, I'm sorry. It's not fair.
No, just give him a number, 3.
Just a number out of the air, that's all he wants.
3 what? 3 projects?
wanted a number.
I'm trying to make a correlation between having this kind of cash on hand and the size of our projects, which a lot of people I don't think appreciate. They don't understand how much money it's put into these projects.
Well, to give you one big number, if we were to have to fund the entire pipelining, that would be 950,000.
Okay, there's an example.
Yeah.
And not an unusual.
No.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd like to point out that we are probably going to use $1 million of our reserve for projects next year. That's in our budget. But we also have to have so much for cash flow. So we got to, and Joni knows this, she's going to be watching the dollars as we go to make sure that we have the cash flow and make sure we meet our payroll. Okay. Good question, though, Frank. Good question. Now we're up to the consent agenda, which I don't believe there's any additions or deletions in the consent agenda. Any from board? Board's okay. So I need a motion to approve the consent agenda. Moved by Manager Tofinelli,
Second.
second by Manager Burnett. Okay, I will read the consent agenda. There are meeting minutes from November 19, 2024 Board Workshop. Also meeting minutes, November 19, 2024 Board Meeting. And the claims list and bank purchase card expenditure summary. Budget amendment resolutions, we have a resolution, and many of these resolutions are to move money around in the right account. Resolution 24-387, amending the 2024 budget to reclass fundings in the 509 implementation funds from 611 Highway 13 wetland, ferric chloride system and desilt O&M to 550 ferric chloride site improvements. Resolution 24-388, amending the 2024 budget to reclass funds in the 509 implementation fund from 626 Upper Watershed Project to 626 Lake Ridge Feasibility Study. Resolution 24-389, amending the 2024 budget to reclass funds in the 509 implementation fund from 626 Upper Watershed Project to 550 200th Street Pond improvements. Also, year-end fund commitments, Resolution 24-390, alum internal fund loan fund balance commitment, and then Resolution 24-391, capital project fund planning fund commitment.
So moved.
It's already been moved and seconded.
Well, okay.
You can third
I
it.
thought I was actually going to be ahead of the game.
You're right on time, though. Okay.
I looked right at you to give you the chance to second.
All right, all in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried unanimously. All right, we're at the point where, Frank, you're going to update us on the future meeting and event schedule.
Didn't I already do that?
No, you didn't.
All right. The meetings are not over for the year, but neither is the celebration. So we have this Thursday, December 19th, our CAC group gets together at the Prior Lake Library Large Meeting Room, 6 p.m., December 19. We also have a cooperators meeting. That's for the PLOC. That is a virtual meeting that we'll be conducting January 7th. It's a 30-minute beginning at 11 a.m. that day, correct? And how do they get the, whatever the code is, contact you folks?
Contact it, we'll post it at the fire station, and yeah, you can email me directly. Yep.
Super. Okay. Board of Managers Workshop is Tuesday, January 21st, 4 p.m., Prior Lake City Hall and Parkview Conference Room. The Board of Managers meeting is also Tuesday, January 21st, 6 p.m., right here. The Farmers-Led Council kind of takes us into the new year. They have their last meeting Thursday, January 23rd at noon at Spring Lake Town Hall. Now, the celebrating goes on in December, and you determine how long it goes and how great it is. So regardless of what spiritual beliefs people have, December is a great month to celebrate them. And then January, getting into the brand new year, and an opportunity for all of us to be renewed and be better people than we are this year. That's it.
Very well spoken. Is there a second on that? Second. Okay.
Do we do it again?
No, don't do it again. Okay, need a motion to adjourn. Motion by Manager Tofinelli,
Second.
second by Manager Burnett. You guys are busy tonight. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. We are adjourned at 7:46. Good night, everybody.